Hey, it is currently 25 to 4 in the morning in the UK, and I've been up looking at the long list for the Booker Prize. It was announced at 12, and I've been doing some research into the books because I wanted to come in and talk about them, but I didn't want to just react and be like, oh, haven't heard of any of these books. So I've looked into all the books a little bit. So I've got my notes here. So if you see me glancing down, it's because I'm checking who these people are. I have my tea in my book mug for my Booker Prize. It was only announced a few hours ago. But my initial reaction is that I'm surprised at how many Americans are on the list. Based on what I've calculated, there's 8 debuts on the list, and which I think that's great. And then there's 7 American identifying authors. So they might be Chinese American or they something else American, but generally there's 7 Americans on the list, which is a lot. I think there's a few British people on the list as well. I think there might be at least 3 on the list. I'm not quite sure what the representation of the list. Generally, I think it's quite good, but I think it could have been better. Did Anne Tyler really need to be on this list? But anyway, I'll get into that now. So first up we have The New Wilderness by Diane Cook. I'm getting Lord of the Flies vibes from it. It's meant to be about motherhood and nature, and the main character is like the mother, and then apparently her daughter is ill, and then she takes the daughter to the wilderness, I think they call it, and it's like this kind of camp where they're in nature and things start turning primitive and weird. So yeah, I think it's meant to be like more Oryx and Crake than Handmaid's Tale if they're comparing it to Atwood. And I've got a note that says it was described as virtuosic. And I always see this adjective on book covers describing books, and I'm like, what does that even mean? But then I looked it up, and apparently it means displaying exceptional skill at an artistic pursuit. And that immediately makes me think the novel's probably not going to be that good. So that's a shame that they described it that way. So yeah, I don't think that'll make the shortlist, but that is a debut and by an American. Next up, we have Thishorrible Body by Tsitsi Dangarembga. She's from Zimbabwe, and the novel is set in Harare in Zimbabwe, which is the capital. And the author is meant to be something of an artistic celebrity in Zimbabwe. And she's founded like film festivals, and apparently she came out in the late 80s with a novel called Nervous Conditions, and then this one has like a character from that, but she's older in this one. And the book is told in second person, which sounds interesting. It's based on a main character who had a job working under this white guy, and then she hated it, so she left the job. And I think it's meant to be that her life, she flops about from one horrible thing to the next horrible thing, and it's meant to be quite violent. And because of the earlier books, apparently it's not plot focused, and it's meant to focus on the character reflecting on how she got into this horrible position. And I think because not that many books are written in second person, and because it's going to have an interesting post-colonial perspective, I think that one could possibly be on the shortlist. Okay, and next up we have Burnt Sugar by Avni Doshi. This is her debut as well, and she's from New Jersey, which is like near New York City in America. I think she's of Indian descent. The novel was published first in India, but now it's going to be published soon in the UK, I think. And this follows a mother and daughter, and it's set in Pune, I think that's how you pronounce it, Pune. It's a city in India. It follows a mother and daughter called Tara, and then I think her daughter's called Antara. The mother is older, but you follow it, I think, when Antara is grown up, and during her childhood, Antara was pretty much neglected because her mother chased after some artist. So it's about neglect, trauma, and memory. And then I think the mother is developing Alzheimer's. It's about that as well. And then apparently the author herself had like a cousin who left her family to join like an ashram guru. So it's not autobiographical, but it's based on some personal experience she had. I wouldn't be surprised if that's on the shortlist as well, but that's her debut. She lives in America. Fourth, we have Who They Was by Gabriel Kraus. Kraus? I'm not sure how to say that, I'm sorry. I think he's born in Britain, but he's from a Polish family. And this book is meant to be like autofiction. It's set in London, and the guy grew up and he was part of like gangs, so there's like drugs, violence, And in the novel, I think he's doing an English degree while he's part of these gangs. So that's not something you read about that much, especially on like campus-based novels. I don't know if it'll be campus-based, but it'll be like a university novel. So I'm really, really intrigued for that. And apparently it's told in London slang. I reckon that could make the shortlist. Next up, we have The Mirror and the Light by Hilary Mantel. I don't really need to introduce this, but this is the third installment in the Cromwell trilogy, and she's an English writer. I reckon this will make the shortlist because I reckon they'll just want the buzz for it. I don't see it winning this year. I just don't think they will award it a third time to her. Or maybe they'll do what they did with Margaret Atwood, where they give her first place twinned with something else. They might do that again. Yeah, they probably will do that again. But Hilary Mantel doesn't need to win. Like, I'm sure the novel could win, but give the space to someone not as established as Hilary Mantel. But anyway, 6, we have a novel called Appearanceagon by Colin McCann, and he's Irish, but this novel is set between Palestine and Israel, so it follows 2 characters. The novel is like a hybrid, like collage of a non-fiction text. Apparently it'll follow like a narrative for some, like a character for like 2 pages, while it's also following these 2 characters in their different countries over their lives, I think. And it's also meant to be like part newspaper clipping, part meditation on theorists, part criticism. So that's giving me the experimental literature tick box. I reckon they'll put it on the long list, but I don't think they'll give that the shortlist. And I think it's just under 500 pages. So I think because it's not too long, maybe it could make the shortlist because people might be more intrigued to read it if it's on the shortlist. This is being compared to Picasso's Guernica painting, and it's like a surrealist anti-war painting. You can see there's a lot going on in it, but the collage effect is meant to be kind of like that. I'm glad that made the list because I hadn't heard of it. Next up, we have The Shadow King by Moza Mengistu. It sounds like a fantasy YA title, but it's not about that at all. This author was born in Ethiopia, but she lives in New York. It's set in the 30s, and it follows Mussolini's invasion of Ethiopia. So it's about colonialism and gender politics. So when you think of soldiers, you think of men. But in this novel, follows a family, and then the main woman character dons her husband's tunic and goes to fight in the battle as well. And then apparently the author had like a grandmother who did the same thing in the war in Ethiopia. So that sounds really, really interesting. I'm not sure if that will make the shortlist. If Hilary Mantel makes the shortlist, I don't think they'll want to give too much of a historical slant to the shortlist. So I don't think that one will get on the shortlist, but I think it will probably be really well received. Okay, and next we have the more hyped on BookTube, which is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. So she's American, this is her debut, and it follows this character, and she works for this white like lifestyle guru. The white woman's husband is a news anchor, and the main character is like the nanny, so she's looking after their 2-year-old daughter, and then the 2-year-old daughter has some kind of emergency, and there's something about the main character takes the girl to like a store, and then because it's a black woman with a white child, the security guards start investigating her. So it's meant to be about racism and I guess probably capitalism, because she's a nanny slash typist, so she's having to make ends meet by doing this. Apparently it's based a little bit on personal experience. Because this has already had quite a lot of hype, I don't think they'll put this on the shortlist, because I think they'll be like, she's got enough readers, and there's other books tackling similar topics. And next up we have Real Life by Brandon Taylor. This is a campus novel, and it follows a black gay character while he's doing his PhD in biochemistry. And I found out that the author dropped out of doing a PhD. I don't know if it was in biochemistry, it was probably something like literature, but he dropped out of it to pursue his writing career, so that's cool. It's meant to be a nuanced take on how, in universities it's like mostly white. And it's probably going to be about like the struggles of that. His father dies and then he has to go back home. Then I guess he struggles to deal with that and uni. Some people have said that this is like quite boring and mundane because it's just his like mundane life at uni. But then when I found out about the author, he wrote the novel in 5 weeks. I mean, I don't think it'll be that mundane because personally, I don't know that much about biochemistry, so I'll find that interesting to read. I think this will be good. But if some people have said the pacing's a bit off, maybe it won't make the shortlist. Okay, and next up I have Redhead by the Side of the Road by Anne Tyler. The author is at 78 now. I was looking at her interviews and she was saying that she was relieved that because of COVID, she didn't have to do a book tour and could do it all on the phone. But she was saying that she thinks that she was probably a better writer when she was younger. So I imagine some of the reviews of this have been like focusing on like just like the small things in life that the book focuses on and the way it like makes the characters' lives ring true. So I think it's probably quite boring. I don't really see this one making the shortlist. But I'm really surprised they put this on because she's already quite well established. But this is her 23rd novel. I don't see this making the shortlist. She's American. I'm like, surely they could have given it to, I don't know, like a Swedish author or an author less established, but whatever. Okay, and next we have Shaggy Bane by Douglas Stewart. I'm really, really excited for this one. I reckon this one will make the shortlist. This is his debut, and he was a fashion designer before he was a writer, so I think that's really, really interesting. It's about, I think he's gay, the boy growing up, and his mother is this kind of like glamorous figure in Glasgow, and it's meant to be a working class childhood, and it follows him over 11 years as he grows up. The mother is going out with this like philandering taxi driver. It sounds fun and it sounds like sassy with the mother, but it's also, I think it's meant to be quite sad, but I think that would be good on the shortlist. And it's been compared to How Late It Was, How Late by James Kelman, and it's set in the 80s under Thatcher, so I'm excited for that. And apparently he worked on the novel for 10 years, so I think this one could possibly win it. But then How Late It Was, How Late won it, so I reckon maybe this one will be tied first place with Hilary Mantel. I'm getting those kind of vibes with it, but I reckon this one will be on the shortlist. And next, so this is the penultimate one, Love and Other Thought Experiments by Sophie Ward. Now, she was an actress. Apparently she was in Holby City, like in the noughties, but I'd never heard of her before this. Sorry. She married this guy in the late 80s, and then she came out as a lesbian in the late 90s, so since then she's been with this woman. The main characters are lesbians, so when I was looking into it, I was like, oh, she's a lesbian as well, so that's cool. Not really that relevant, but it's interesting that on a Wikipedia page it was like, she left her straight husband for a woman. Ooh. The tea, the drama. This is her debut, so I think she's in her 50s now. I think that's really interesting that she's a slightly older person writing a novel now, so it probably will be quite well considered, I imagine. It's about this lesbian couple, and they are thinking about having a baby. Then one of them starts, one night she thinks like an ant is boring its way into her brain through her eye, and then her partner is like, are you okay? I don't think an ant would do that. But she becomes fixated on this idea that this ant is boring into her eye. So I don't know if the novel is meant to be about psychosis, but it's being compared to Nausea and Kafka's Metamorphosis. People are saying it's imaginative, but I'm not sure how well rounded off everything will be. So I don't think that will make the shortlist, but I think that would be a fun read. Lastly, we have How Much of These Hills is Gold by C. Pam Zhang. This is her debut, and I reckon this one will make the shortlist. This is a Western novel, but it's meant to be an immigrant story, so the author is Chinese American. This novel is being compared to Sarah Waters. So it's set in 19th century American West, in the midst of the American gold rush, and it follows the settling of Chinese Americans in the American West. I didn't even really know about that, which says a lot. It's nuanced to have a Western doing this kind of take, but I'm not sure how good the writing is going to be. But it doesn't seem too long, so it must be quite good. It has an interesting take on gender as well, and that the novel doesn't use pronouns or something, because it follows two orphan children and their father dies, so there's kind of trauma in it, and then one of them is a girl and then another one is gender fluid, so I think that's why either the book doesn't use pronouns or it uses pronouns in an interesting way, something like that. I'd never heard of this at all before I got on the list, but I'm really excited to hear more about this book. But I don't think it will win because I reckon it's a historical novel, so I think they're probably going to give it to Mantel if it's historical. But apparently she wrote the novel listening to like 3-hour clips of thunderstorms. So what do you think about the Longlist? Are you disappointed? Are you surprised? I'm really quite pleasantly surprised, I think. But I'm a little bit disappointed at how many Americans are on there. But even though they're Americans, they're not full Americans. It's mixed nationality. So I think that's really, really interesting. Yes. What book do you think will win? And what books do you think will make the shortlist? Let me know in the comments. I won't be reading all of the long list. I might read a few of the shortlist once it's announced. I've got Bring Up the Bodies coming in the post. So then maybe The Mirror and the Light. But it depends what I'm doing for money. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. If you're new to watching me, like and subscribe, please. Alright, bye.